Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am Sergeant First Class McCarter, a cyber operations supervisor with the 780th Military Intelligence Brigade.
And I am Technical Sergeant T.J. McSherry, a language analyst from the 31st Intelligence Squadron.
On behalf of the Commanding General of the United States Army Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon, Major General Paul T. Stanton, and the United States Army Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon Command Sergeant Major Michael K. Sterrett, welcome to today's redesignation ceremony. Today, we remember and honor one of the most inspirational leaders our country has ever known, as we redesignate this installation as Fort Eisenhower in honor of General Dwight D. Eisenhower, as he preferred to be called. Once his time in the Oval Office was complete, President Eisenhower asked to be reactivated in the United States Army so he could again be called General Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower and George Washington are the only United States presidents to re-enter the armed forces after leaving the office of president.
The leadership would like to thank the following groups and individuals for their support to the redesignation ceremony. Please hold your applause to the end. Mr. Jody Harmon, Eisenhower portrait artist. Jody has dedicated his life to preserving the lineage and heritage of cavalry, armor, and now cyber through his military art. His role as the Armor magazine's art illustrator allows him to construct priceless and historical works of art. Mr. Jack Coyle, who provided the military police and World War II Jeep, along with World War II era artifacts and memorabilia. The Alliance for Fort Eisenhower. Sergeant First Class Jason Spencer, CCOE logo design winner. Sergeant First Class Jason Spencer's entry was among 24 received from around the central Savannah River area and beyond. His winning design incorporated General Eisenhower's commitment to service and our cyberspace multi-service military installation. The Army recognized his talent as well, recently assigning him as the U.S. Army's Artist in Residence at the Center for Military History in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. Mr. Dan Posey, Fort Eisenhower Special Events Coordinator, without whom none of this would be possible. Ms. Brandy Battetti, Fort Eisenhower Event Reception Coordinator. The Fort Moore History Museum, which provided official General Eisenhower artifacts showcased for the ceremony, and Mr. Trey Noble, an American Sign Language interpreter on loan from Columbia County. Lastly, we would like to thank the service members, families, and community partners for their assistance in making today happen. Thank you. I would now like to introduce some of our distinguished guests for today's redesignation ceremony. Once again, please hold your applause until all names have been read. Mrs. Nomi Harris Stanton and Mrs. Hannah Stanton. Mrs. Angelina Sterrett. Admiral Michelle Howard, United States Navy retired, Chair of the Naming Commission. Brigadier General Ty Seigel, United States Army retired, Vice Chair of the Naming Commission. Mr. Jerry Buchanan, Commissioner of the Naming Commission. Mr. Lawrence Romo, Commissioner of the Naming Commission. Representatives from the offices of Senator John Ossoff, Senator Raphael Warnock, Governor Brian Kemp, and Congressman Mike Collins. Congressman Rick Allen, 12th District of Georgia. Mr. Brad Raffensperger, Georgia Secretary of State. Mayor Britton Williams, City of North Augusta. Lieutenant General John B. Morrison, Jr., HQDA G6, and Mrs. Ann Morrison. Lieutenant General Maria Barrett, Commanding General, United States Army Cyber Command, and Mr. Brian Barrett. Lieutenant General Susan Lawrence, United States Army, retired. Georgia Representative Shaw Blackman. Georgia Representative Gloria Frazier and Dr. Wayne Frazier. Georgia Representative Lynn Gladney. Ms. Angela Odom, Civilian Aide to the Secretary of the Army. Mr. Kevin Schwedo, Civilian Aide to the Secretary of the Army. Mr. Peter Hoffman, Civilian Aide to the Secretary of the Army, and Mrs. Hoffman. Dr. Michael Solmeyer. Mr. Daniel Klipstein. Major General Joanna Clybourne, Deputy Commanding General, United States Army Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon. Major General Joseph Marsilia. Mr. Robert Casimir, Deputy to the Commanding General, United States Army Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon, and Mrs. Ellen Casimir. Mr. David May, Senior Cyber Intelligence Advisor, United States Army Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon. Chief Warrant Officer 5, Paul Sankey, Command Chief Warrant Officer, United States Army Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon. Command Sergeant Major Jack Nichols, Command Sergeant Major, United States Army Cyber Command, Fort Gordon, Georgia. And again, welcome to all other distinguished guests, members of the community, soldiers, civilians, family, and friends of the Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon/Eisenhower. Master Sergeant Louis C. Graziano earned his 2 campaign battle stars, leading a platoon of communications specialists tasked to assure reliable means of command and control for the highest of command personnel. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, Louis boarded a landing ship tank with his men and landed upon the sands of Omaha Beach near the Saint Laurent-Vierville exit in Normandy, France. After serving bravely on the shores of Normandy, Louis advanced to the French city of Saint-Lô and then the city of Reims. Upon establishment of a command post within the heavily mined city, Louis was ordered to install General Eisenhower's phone line. This particular phone line was vital, not only for the general's real-time communication, but by installing it, he helped speed a timelier Allied victory. In Reims, General Eisenhower, U.S. General Walter Bedell Smith, and General Jodl of the German Army signed the Articles of Surrender with French Major General François Chavez signing off as the official witness. With Louis in the room, the unconditional surrender of Germany was signed, officially ending the war. It is most likely that Louis is the last surviving witness to this historic event, and coincidentally, Louis's niece is currently serving the U.S. Navy on board the USS Eisenhower.
Thank you to Mr. Louis Graziano and the Eisenhower family for attending. The musical entertainment for today's ceremony is provided by Fort Jackson's 282nd Army Band under the leadership of Chief Warrant Officer 3, Kevin Pick. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as you are able for the opening prayer delivered by the United States Army Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon Command Chaplain, Chaplain Darren Chester. Please remain standing for the arrival of the official party, honors, and the national anthem.
Good morning. I invite you to join me for a word of prayer. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, as we gather this morning to rename this installation, I'm reminded of many of your servants whose name you changed in order to initiate a new era and to set the course of history on a new path. I pray that today's actions may similarly affect such a change, and that the path on which you set this post and our nation as a whole may be in accordance with your will, illuminated by your light and protected by your mighty power. As we redesignate this installation to Fort Eisenhower, a place where warriors are trained, equipped, and sustained to defend this blessed nation, let us be reminded that we as Americans must resolve in unity to carry forward steadily, surely, and without complaint the burdens of a prolonged and complex struggle with liberty the stake, and provide for us the unwavering strength, moral integrity, and resolute will to do so. May your blessings be upon Fort Eisenhower and all who shall serve, live, and work here. In your most holy name I pray. Amen. go. Anthem.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
With the threat of war looming in the mid-1930s, U.S. Army officials began identifying sites suitable for division-level training. By 1941, a decision was made to acquire such an area near Augusta, Georgia, and the War Department established a $22 million contract to construct a new installation. During World War II, the 55,000-acre training site was temporary home to 3 divisions until they were sent to Europe, where they all served with distinction. From October 1943 to January 1945, Camp Gordon served as a prisoner of war camp for German and Italian captives. Following World War II, the Military Police School moved to Camp Gordon, and on 1 October, a Signal Corps training center was activated. Since that time, Camp Gordon has served as a crucial communications training installation for the U.S. Army Signal Corps. The Korean War led to a major expansion of the Signal Corps Training Center, and in 1956, Camp Gordon was redesignated Fort Gordon. This expansion required the Military Police School's movement to Fort McClellan, Alabama. The post-Korea and Vietnam years found the Army revising to keep pace with rapid technological advances on the modern battlefield. In 1986, the United States Army Signal Corps Regiment was established and Fort Gordon designated as the regimental home base. Still the home of the Signal Regiment, Fort Gordon also supports not only signal, but cyber, military intelligence, Defense Health Agency, Ordnance, and Army Material Command. With the increased need and use of cyber technology, this support made Fort Gordon the perfect location to consolidate the United States Army Cyber Command into one location. In March 2014, Fort Gordon was designated as the United States Army Cyber Center of Excellence. Today, Fort Gordon, soon to be Fort Eisenhower, remains a vital and premier center for training and operation of the complex communications that empower our military as it encounters our adversaries.
The William M. Thornberry National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021 directed the establishment of a commission relating to assigning, modifying, or removing of names, symbols, displays, monuments, and paraphernalia to assets of the Department of Defense that commemorate the Confederate States of America, or any person who served voluntarily with the Confederate States of America. The Naming Commission selected names after soliciting feedback from the stakeholders at Fort Gordon. They selected names that represent the honor, the heroism, sacrifices, and values of the Army. The Central Savannah River area came together to recommend President and General of the Army, Dwight David Eisenhower, for his lasting contributions to the community, soldiers, the Army, and our nation. The Naming Commission concurred. The very soul of a military unit is symbolized in the colors under which it fights, for they record the glories of the past, stand guardian over its present destiny, and ensure the inspiration for its future. From the earliest of times, warriors have used a banner or other symbols to identify units and to serve as a rallying point for their troops. Regiments were assigned a specific color and number for ease of identification. The position of the regiment on the battlefield and the location of its command were revealed by the location of its banner. If the commander fell in battle, someone would rally to the colors and assume the position of unit leadership. When a unit is deactivated and consigned to history, a casing of the colors ceremony is performed. At this time, Colonel Reginald Evans, the United States Army Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon Garrison Commander, and Command Sergeant Major Aaron Rose, the United States Army Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon Garrison Command Sergeant Major, will now case the garrison colors, symbolizing the final chapter in Fort Gordon history. The custodian of the colors, Master Sergeant Christopher Jackson, lowers the organizational colors, allowing the garrison commander and garrison command sergeant major to case them. This casing signifies retiring the Fort Gordon garrison colors. At this time, Sergeant Major Richard Littlefield marches forward the Fort Eisenhower garrison colors. Colonel Evans and Command Sergeant Major Rose will uncase the Fort Eisenhower garrison colors, symbolizing the redesignation of this installation. The Fort Eisenhower garrison colors consist of the Installation Management Command distinctive unit insignia and Fort Eisenhower scroll. These colors represent the pride and spirit of the soldiers and civilians who serve under them, providing sustainment, support services, and base protection, ultimately empowering a high quality of life for those who live, work, and rely on the installation and this community. Effective 27 October 2023, Fort Gordon, Installation Code 13055, is redesignated as Fort Eisenhower in accordance with Section 370 of the William M. Mack Thornberry National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021 and Army General Order 2023-20. Signed, the Honorable Christine E. Warmoth, Secretary of the Army.
Fort Eisenhower is designated in honor of General Dwight David Eisenhower. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, born on October 14, 1890 in Denison, Texas, to David Jacob Eisenhower and Ida Elizabeth Stover Eisenhower, was the third of his parents' 7 sons. 2 years after he graduated from high school, he landed an appointment at the United States Military Academy, where, in 1915, he proudly graduated from West Point and was commissioned as a second lieutenant. After graduation, General Eisenhower moved from post to post throughout the Southeast, graduating first in his class at the Army's Command and General Staff School. 8 years later, General Eisenhower was promoted to Major General, and soon after, he became Commander-in-Chief of the Allied Forces and led Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa. On D-Day, General Eisenhower commanded the Allied forces in the Normandy invasion. In December of that year, he was promoted to 5-star general, and in 1945, after Germany's surrender, he was made military governor of the U.S. occupied zone. After returning home, he was appointed U.S. Army Chief of Staff and ultimately accepted further appointment as the first Supreme Allied Commander of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. In 1952, General Eisenhower retired from active service and announced his candidacy for the Republican Party nomination. After winning the election by a landslide, Eisenhower was elected to the United States' 34th president, and he served 2 terms. General Eisenhower died on March 28, 1969, at Walter Reed Army Hospital in Washington, D.C., following a long battle from a heart-related illness.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the host for today's ceremony, the Commanding General of the United States Army Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Eisenhower, Major General Paul T. Stanton.
It would just take me a second to study my emotions after we officially have redesignated. How significant. 62 years ago, on a cold January day, President Eisenhower stood on this parade field with a large hometown Augustan crowd in attendance to hold the most meaningful formation of his service. It was his last before retiring. President Eisenhower stated to the soldiers, "There will be in my soul a certain nostalgia as I see a uniform, whether it be a single soldier on the streets or when I see a unit marching in a parade. God bless you and keep going. I have seen a command this morning that would thrill the heart of any soldier." General Eisenhower, sir, we are on the same field where it thrills our hearts to commemorate your legacy. Fort Eisenhower will forever be associated with an incredible soldier, statesman, visionary, and world leader. To reuse your 1952 campaign slogan, "It's time for a change." And here on Fort Eisenhower, we like Ike. Welcome all to a beautiful day for golf or for a ceremony. I want to offer a special thank you to our honorary guests. Madam Secretary, ma'am, the Eisenhower family represented today by both Susan and Mary. Admiral Howard, the Naming Commission Chair. Master Sergeant Retired Louis Graziano, thank you, sir. Our community leaders, individuals who have advocated for the Eisenhower name and remain steadfast in their support for all of our soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, coasties, and guardians. Thank you. I told many of the soldiers and civilians who prepared our renaming ceremony that this day may be amongst the most memorable of your career. Today, we honor a true American hero, a leader respected by the world, a nation, and of course, the people of Augusta, Georgia. We're the last military installation to hold a renaming ceremony. As Secretary of Defense Austin said, changing the name of our posts ensures our nation remains a champion of liberty, equality, and freedom, and continues to defend these values here at home and throughout the world. We are now Fort Eisenhower, an inspiring name that underscores the role this installation plays as a cyber power projection platform on a world stage. General Eisenhower dedicated his life to global impact. Here, we forge and project power daily in and through the cyberspace warfighting domain, cyber, signal, electronic warfare, and intelligence. We cultivate leaders who must embody the qualities of courage, integrity, and selflessness that General Eisenhower exemplified throughout his career, because our actions, like his, have global impact. It is fitting that our CSRA community did in fact recommend the name Fort Eisenhower to the Naming Commission. For as Susan Eisenhower noted in her biography of her grandfather, Augusta was the place that really brought the president relaxation and a sense of perspective. Fitting also that Eisenhower's name now adorns an Army post. There are countless streets, buildings, even towns in the United States and across the world that bear his name, but not until today an Army post. And he rests eternal with his 5 stars on his shoulders. The Army now honors this soldier for life. General Eisenhower, Mamie, and their family lived an Army life. 33 moves. Pause for emphasis. 33 moves in his career. General Eisenhower spoke of the post that had no family housing. He was separated from wife and son routinely. He personally converted a set of barracks to a home while stationed at Camp Meade. He and Mamie lived with bats, when they were stationed in Panama. There were no notice adjustments to their orders, and of course, deployments to war. There's no mistake, the Eisenhowers were an Army family. From a humble, hardworking upbringing in Abilene, Kansas, General Eisenhower argued in his own words that you've got to be for something. That must resonate with us. For in our profession as soldiers, we are for something. We fight and win our nation's wars to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. This will defend. We answer the call when asked, and we here on Fort Eisenhower stand our post of every minute of every day. In fact, there are many service members that are not at this ceremony because they stand guard for what our nation defends. We accept this calling just as General Eisenhower recognized when he first swore his oath upon entry to West Point. In his words, when we raised our right hands and repeated the official oath, there was no confusion. A feeling came over me that the expression, the United States of America, would now and henceforth mean something different than it ever had before. From here on, it would be the nation I would be serving, not myself. This remains our oath, unchanged. It is the cornerstone upon which we strengthen our profession. Upon graduating from West Point, Dwight David Eisenhower began his long and arduous career, his pathway to lead our nation in war and peace. One remarkable story. In 1919, he crossed the country in a truck convoy to literally see if it could be done. Absent contracted maintenance or field service reps that we see today, absent a road network, the months-long trip made a lasting impression that drove the need for change. Years later, having proven a master logistician during World War II, President Eisenhower would create the interstate system we recognize today. It was the largest public works program in history, connecting our country for commerce and pleasure. Let us learn from his example, identify the need for change, and drive results. This is innovation. This is the hallmark of our community on Fort Eisenhower. President Eisenhower's map notably did not include an I-20 connector to Gate 6. I'm sure that he would be proud of our community's vision to extend our interstate and improve the flow of intellectual capital all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, to the coast of South Carolina. We are the Southeast Cyber Hub, and we must invest in our infrastructure to support our growth. Innovation, vision, and investment marked General Eisenhower's career. He recognized the need to be focused on the present while anticipating the future. He may have been the perfect TRADOC and Army Futures Command commander before they were even envisioned. He started with our people. The will of our soldiers and our civilians is and always has been and always will be our asymmetric advantage. He taught second lieutenants at Leavenworth, trained new soldiers at Camp Colt, and was twice assigned to training at Camp Meade. Fitting that Fort Meade is now the home to U.S. Cyber Command and many of the soldiers that we train here on Fort Eisenhower. There's a small plaque in the back corner of post along one of my former run routes where it acknowledges then Lieutenant Colonels Eisenhower and Patton, where they developed the concept of tank warfare, transforming tanks from slow and laboring trench warfare machine guns into the speed and agility that Eisenhower guided and Patton led to victory in World War II. Fort Eisenhower soldiers and civilians must have the same sort of vision. We must guide the future of our data-centric network, our evolution of cyber capabilities, and our effective employment of electronic warfare and large-scale combat operations. See the future and guide the formation from slow and laboring to speed and agility. General Eisenhower's contribution to our nation did not end on the battlefield. In 1953, he reaffirmed his oath as President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief to guide our nation through a period of immense change and transformation, just as we guide our Army through immense change and transformation. He championed peace, prosperity, and the advancement of civil rights and desegregation. President Eisenhower communicated effectively to lead these successes amongst his middle way agenda. He championed information advantage before there was any doctrine. He recognized the need to keep the American public so well informed about the Army that there would be an authentic partnership between the civilians at home and the troops in uniform. Those are his words. A partnership like ours today between the CSRA and Fort Eisenhower. He delivered his message with timing as a critical ingredient to public relations. It's not always about the picture, the quote, or the video itself, but how that message is delivered to resonate with the audience. President Eisenhower demonstrated mastery with print and what was then the novel introduction of television news. Begging the question, how good are we at social media, Snapchat and Instagram, and the challenge associated with today's TikTok? Watching what's happening and unfolding on a world stage as we speak. He was not a computer scientist, but thankfully President Eisenhower was an advocate for advancing technology. General Eisenhower's personal foray into early computing would not have resulted in a career as a cyber soldier, but he did promote science. As Chief of Staff of the Army, he oversaw the post-World War II return of U.S. soldiers from overseas, a logistics and administrative challenge of unprecedented scale. It required punch card computers that strained to keep track of hundreds of thousands of people scattered in outposts around the world. General Eisenhower wrote, "I must confess that these machines, perhaps feeling the pressure themselves, at times seem confused by the data fed into them. Since then, I've always mistrusted a little, even the most handsome, most intricate, and guaranteed computer." I offer, rest easy, General. The soldiers on this field today would certainly earn your trust and confidence with assured computing. I have no idea what a handsome computer is, but I'm pretty sure that General Barrett has one in Fortitude Hall. Fortunately, President Eisenhower saw past his early computer challenges and promoted the rapid development of science and technology, that which is in use at Fort Eisenhower today, including the U-2 program for deep sensing, the first American satellite launched in 1958, establishing NASA and establishing the Advanced Research Projects Agency that pioneered the internet. Where would our Fort Eisenhower mission be without his vision? We wouldn't be postured to fight and win in cyber operations that General Nakasone has called the ultimate team sport. From football at West Point to leading the strongest coalition in world history, there has been no better team player or architect of coalitions than General Eisenhower. Our allies and partners are here with us this morning. More importantly, they are on the other end of our radios in combat and sending and receiving ones and zeros in the cyber domain today as we celebrate. Our Fort Eisenhower mission is building those partnerships through education and training, and then, as a team, we work together to hold our adversaries at bay. Just as General Eisenhower found himself at the vanguard of new technology, concepts, and world events that changed the character of war, we on Fort Eisenhower are ready to meet the vision of a data-centric Army. We will support warfighting by enabling better and faster decisions to gain a position of advantage over our enemies. Today and henceforth, we operate under the banner of Fort Eisenhower. We hone our knowledge and our warfighting spirit to honor the legacy of this extraordinary leader and his family. We will uphold the highest standards of military excellence by fostering an environment of inclusion and by continuing to serve our nation with honor, loyalty, and dedication. Like General Eisenhower, let us be visionary. Let us be innovative technologists. Let us be inspiring. Let us be warfighters. And let us be proud of our name, Fort Eisenhower. Forge and project power so that we can be all we can be. Thank you.
Our next guest was sworn into office on May 27, 2021, as the 25th Secretary of the Army. As the civilian leader of the United States Army, she oversees the service's $185 billion budget and is responsible for decisions impacting nearly 1 million active, Guard, and Reserve soldiers, and more than 330,000 Army civilians. She has worked on defense and national security policy for more than 25 years, as both a career civilian and as a presidential appointee. She was the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy from 2014 to 2016, and previously served as Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Strategy, Plans, and Forces. During President Barack Obama's first term, Secretary Wormuth served as a Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Defense at the National Security Council. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to the Honorable Christine E. Wormuth.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here this morning, and thank you, General Stanton, so much for your very heartfelt remarks. I was able to spend some time, both Susan Eisenhower and Mary Jean Eisenhower were lucky enough to be invited over to the CG's quarters and be hosted by his lovely wife, Nomi. And we had a great evening, and I was able to see for myself just how excited General Stanton is about this renaming and how deeply he's immersed himself into General Eisenhower and President Eisenhower's history. And so it's wonderful to be a part of this ceremony this morning, and it's wonderful to be here in Augusta. I do want to thank both Mary Jean and Susan Eisenhower for continuing your grandfather's legacy of service, each of you in your different ways, and for being with us here today. To members of Congress and other elected officials in the audience, thank you for your continued support for the Army's ongoing modernization priorities. Your partnership has allowed us to take better care of our people, including some much-needed upgrades to barracks right here in Augusta. And of course, a special thanks to the wider Augusta community that has supported civilians and soldiers at this installation since it was first established more than 80 years ago. The entire United States Army owes you a debt of gratitude for your unwavering hospitality. We're here today not simply to change signs and street names, but to honor the legacy of a man who built strong ties to this part of Georgia. President Eisenhower found in Augusta a place where he could step away from the burdens of Washington, and we know sometimes those burdens are heavy, and think deeply about the many challenges facing the United States in the years following World War II. As Major General Stanton reminded us, President Eisenhower also carried out one of his final acts as president, an impromptu troop review in January 1961, right here on these grounds. He used his brief remarks on that special day to reflect on his own military service and to describe the inspiration that he continued to draw from soldiers and Army civilians long after his own career in uniform had drawn to a close. Whether for leisure, contemplation, or healing, or some combination of all three, President Eisenhower chose to return to Augusta and this installation time and time again. So as the Naming Commission explored options for the renaming of this installation, it's no surprise that they recommended President Eisenhower. And it is with great pride that we rename this installation in honor of one of our great generals and presidents. Today, I ask all of you to find meaning not only in who we are commemorating, but what this ceremony represents. It's the culmination of a base renaming process that began in 2020 when Congress first wrote the commission into law. It was a moment of unrest and significant division in our country, and both political parties overwhelmingly agreed that names on certain military installations and the legacies of those names were only deepening our social and political divides. Members of Congress sought to close those divides by focusing the American people on a different set of leaders and symbols that unquestionably represent the best of our nation and our military. Leadership and personnel at each of these installations have implemented the Commission's recommendations with the utmost professionalism. And this effort wouldn't have been possible without the assistance of the surrounding communities of those installations, which have for so many years welcomed our soldiers and their families with open arms. Change is often necessary, but not often easy. So I want to thank each and every person who helped with this redesignation for supporting such an important step forward. The Army is a values-based institution, and today we choose to honor a man, a general, a president, who upheld the values we want our force to embody. Values like loyalty, integrity, and selfless service. In doing so, we also highlight the critical role this installation has played in the defense of our nation over the years, and in the expertise and capabilities it will contribute in the years to come. The Department of War first broke ground on this site in July 1941, and 82 years ago, in October 1941, Camp Gordon opened its gates. But the paint on those gates was barely dry when only 2 months later, bombs fell on Pearl Harbor, officially pulling the United States into the Second World War. Almost immediately, troops from the 4th Infantry, 26th Infantry, and 10th Armored Divisions began training here for deployments to Europe. Fighting under General Eisenhower's command, soldiers from Gordon would go on to help liberate millions from Nazi tyranny and restore peace to a world in crisis. In his time, President Eisenhower lived to see a dramatic evolution of the United States Army. From a constabulary organization concerned primarily with the defense of its own backyard to a dominant land force that would underwrite decades of American strategic supremacy and lay the foundation for a more stable international order. And when he addressed soldiers here one final time as Commander-in-Chief during that January 1961 troop review, President Eisenhower reminded them that with their service, they had helped build, quote, a shield that no enemy dare attack or attempt to break down. The world has changed considerably in the years since President Eisenhower left the White House. With the Cold War and 2 decades of counterterror campaigns behind us, we are once again reorganizing our Army for dominance in large-scale combat organizations. We are making these changes in part because our adversaries and strategic competitors are growing bolder. Their technological capabilities, especially in signals, electronic and cyber warfare domains, are more advanced than ever before. But thanks to the command on this installation, so are the United States armies. Fort Eisenhower truly embodies our commitment to operating the most technologically sophisticated army in the world. Army Cyber Command is headquartered here and is at the forefront of integrating operations in the cyberspace domain with those in the land domain. Army Cyber has deep technical expertise on mission, or, as I'm told they like to say here, on keyboard. The Army's Cyber Center of Excellence is also here, building the necessary skill sets and high technology workforce to support this mission and helping allies and partners do the same. It is not lost on me, being at the home of Army's cyber efforts, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Now, I won't ask you to take out your iPhones and change your passwords, but I will take this opportunity to thank our cyber workforce here and across the Army for the work they do every day to keep our nation safe. The Army has transformed in the more than 60 years since President Eisenhower's last address here to Army troops, but his core message still rings true. Here at Fort Eisenhower, the Army is continuing to build shields that no enemy should dare attack or break down. Today, we find ourselves again in a perilous geopolitical environment, and I charge each and every soldier and civilian here at Fort Eisenhower to ensure our capabilities remain more advanced than our adversaries and to continue preparing for the fight that may lie ahead. Because for the United States Army, the future is our focus. We must continue to look ahead to the challenges and opportunities of tomorrow. We must train hard to perfect our warfighting skills, and we must innovate to make our force stronger than ever. And as the name of this post changes, it doesn't mean that we have forgotten the service or sacrifice of the many soldiers, civilians, and families who have called this place home over the past 8 decades. Instead, it signifies that we're embracing the future before us, honoring one of our nation's most storied leaders, and sending a clear signal of the Army we want to be and the values that make us who we are. Thank you again to Army Cyber Command, the Garrison team, the entire Eisenhower family, and the City of Augusta for celebrating this renaming together with us. I look forward to all of the great things that Fort Eisenhower will do for our Army and our nation. Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to introduce our next guest. She is well known for her work as a policy analyst, essayist, op-ed writer, biographer, and editor. She has provided analysis for many major news channels and programs, and provided narration on military documentaries. She founded the Eisenhower Group Incorporated, which has provided strategic counsel on business development, public affairs, and communications projects. She served as a member of 3 Blue Ribbon Commissions for the Department of Energy, and in 1998 was appointed to the National Academy of Sciences Standing Committee. Today, she serves on several charitable and corporate advisory boards. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Miss Susan Eisenhower.
Secretary Wormuth, General Stanton, Admiral Howard, and other distinguished guests, I just want to say this is an enormous honor for my sister Mary Jean and I to be with you here today. This is a remarkable occasion when we mark the redesignation ceremony renaming Fort Gordon to Fort Eisenhower. Whenever I visit Army installations, and especially the forts where so many people come together for a common cause, I think about self-sacrifice. And I want to thank General Stanton for mentioning Mamie Eisenhower today. She once told me that she'd kept house in everything but an igloo. And I thought that her humor, and thank you for that laughter, was remarkable given the fact that she was a Denver debutante and had no idea what Army life was like. What an extraordinary sense of self-sacrifice she brought to her role as an Army wife. And so I'd like to take this opportunity not just to express my deepest gratitude as an American to all of you who work on these important issues, but also to your families who are part of this adventure, part of this commitment to the future of our nation. I'd like to say, for all of the reasons that have just been mentioned, it's really extraordinary, the alignment, I believe, between the renaming of this fort and not just the mission of the fort, but also its connection to Augusta, Georgia. In thinking about Mamie's long trajectory, meeting a man who was, as she described, quite different than the other men in Denver, they were all what she called lounge lizards with patent leather hair. No, she married this handsome, vital soldier, and his own success has been a subject of great interest for me. I've often marveled at the fate in our history. Mary's grandfather and my grandfather's road to West Point was not a straight one. He came from a deeply religious, pacifist household. His parents were so financially strapped that they were unable to provide the family's 6 boys with a college education. Ike helped his older brother go to college before he faced his own dilemma on how to get an education. Serving in the military was Ike's choice, much to the sadness of his pacifist mother, and he entered West Point with the class of 1915, but only after another young man so selected failed the physical exam. This fate brought Eisenhower to the Army, but the ethos of serving the country fused with his spiritual beliefs. As I once wrote, quote, Eisenhower's leadership of head and heart was projected in the context of a higher cause, one that rested on accountability and humility. Ike's broad smile, his magnetic energy, and his deepest commitment to the fighting men and women under his command are legendary. The decisions he had to make during his years as commanding general and then Supreme Allied Commander of Western Forces during World War II, along with his two-term presidency, are also times when he had to make some of the most crucial decisions of the 20th century. In addition to D-Day and other wartime operations, during his presidency, he dealt with the advent of the hydrogen bomb and the dawn of the space age, which he shaped to assure free access to this uncharted medium, and then established the architecture for innovation in those sciences, bringing about the first reconnaissance satellites and the first communications satellites in space. Innovations in other critical technology are the bedrock of our modern society and our modern security infrastructure. Always projecting optimism and constructive long-term plans, Eisenhower, as president, balanced the budget 3 times in his 8-year presidency and came close on another 2. This having taken the United States off of economic wartime footing. He left his successor with a budget surplus. Ike got 80% of his legislative agenda through Congress, a Congress controlled by the other party. After he ended the Korean War in 1953, there were no American combat casualties during his administration. He brought innovation to our national security apparatus, built the interstate highway system, and championed civil rights. He was perhaps the most nonpartisan of our president of the 20th century. In short, he left the country and the world better than he found it. In war and peace, his goal was to assure unity of purpose through building trust and thinking and acting for the long haul. My siblings and I could only guess at the consequential decisions he had to make during those years we shared with him. As a family man, he was engaged and fun-loving, and we learned and saw in practice the importance of family and country. We also absorbed the critical role that rest and reflection plays in producing a sustainable life balance, especially for strategic leaders. My grandmother, Mamie, was convinced that the assembly of friends and joyful events, many of them here in the Augusta region, were also part of a stress-reducing regime. My, how they loved this community, and how wonderful it is that they've come back. In this context, Augusta and the state of Georgia provided considerable respite for them. My grandfather knew that he must allow his brain to rest so that he could process the complex factors of critical decision-making. Hunting, golf, oil painting were indispensable parts of that reset. So was the camaraderie of friends. And here in Augusta, he was buoyed by those around him and the beautiful countryside that surrounds Augusta and seen throughout the state. Only occasionally, merriment was mixed with frustration when he hit golf balls into what he regarded as a very poorly positioned tree on the 17th fairway at Augusta National. The friendship and the enduring support of this community has never been forgotten by our family, just as it was never forgotten by Ike and Mamie. Again, we wish to express our thanks to the people of Augusta, Georgia, Admiral Howard for the renaming commission, and all others who have worked so hard to make this wonderful tribute a reality. Our gratitude also goes to all the people who supported this effort and who at the fort have shown so much enthusiasm for this change. This is where the past and the future can now comfortably reside. If Dwight Eisenhower were here today, he would be full of heartfelt appreciation for the focus and dedication this community has placed on serving our country and keeping it safe. You who served here at Fort Eisenhower are truly an inspiration from us all, and I know how much Ike is glad to be back with the men and women of our nation's armed forces. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our distinguished host and guests for your contributions to the ceremony. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the screens on the field. The 2023 Fort Eisenhower Army Non-Commissioned Officer of the Year, Sergeant First Class Robert Strawn. The Air Force Non-Commissioned Officer of the Year, Tech Sergeant Jasmine Stewart. The Navy Non-Commissioned Officer of the Year, Chief Petty Officer Molly Erickson. And the Marine Non-Commissioned Officer of the Year, Corporal Blaze Fleeman. Prepare to unveil the new Fort Eisenhower signs at our main and McKenna gates. May I ask for everyone to please join me in the countdown from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome once again, this time to Fort Eisenhower. Now, Secretary Warmoth and Miss Eisenhower will join Major General Stanton and Command Sergeant Major Sterrett for the unveiling of the General Dwight D. Eisenhower bust, located just in front of the stage. This bust was created by a talented artist by the name of Elaine Roberts, a native of Holland who studied sculpture in Italy and who now lives and owns her own art and design studio in Clearwater, Florida. After today's ceremony, the bust will reside in the Eisenhower Conference and Catering Center until its final location within the new Cyber Center of Excellence campus is completed. Ladies and gentlemen, as able, please rise and join us in singing the Armed Forces Medley led by the 282nd Army Band. And then we ask you to please remain standing for the departure of the official party.
From the Space Force, Technical Sergeant Colby Parson. Ladies and gentlemen, from the Air Force, Technical Sergeant Antonio Samuels. Ladies and gentlemen, from the Navy, Petty Officer Timothy File. Ladies and gentlemen, from the United States Army, Private First Class Edwin Medina. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the United States Army and the Fort Eisenhower Commanding General, Major General Paul T. Stanton, we thank you for your attendance at today's ceremony and express sincere gratitude to all who made this day possible. A replica of the new Fort Eisenhower main gate sign is on display at the installation flagpole for those who would like to take pictures. Thank you again for being a part of this historic occasion. May we continue to honor the legacy of General Dwight D. Eisenhower and the Army as we move forward as Fort Eisenhower. Forge and project power. Victory starts here. Be all you can be.
God bless America.